The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 3 of the 4-week Mindset Bootcamp. I can't believe it's gone so quickly. I hope you've had a fantastic week as well. We spent some time last week looking at how to build the best version of yourself and also understanding why it's important to be able to look at all the aspects of your life and then be able to work out whether they are things that you want to keep or whether they are things that you want to change or modify in any particular way. Now, to do all of that, it really helps to have goals. So, this webinar is all about goal setting. And really importantly, it's not just about goal setting in terms of I want to achieve whatever it may be. Really importantly, it's understanding what you need to do to be able to achieve your goals, because it's quite common that people set themselves a goal. The perfect example of this is New Year's resolutions, where people will come up with all sorts of plans for their life. And then when you check up on them a couple of weeks into January, nothing's really happened or nothing's really changed. So today's webinar is all about understanding, first of all, how to set goals and also what you need to do to achieve them. But from another level as well, it's important to understand why we need goals and why they form such an important function. So last week, your homework or your task was to be able to use empowering language to describe the best version of yourself. And hopefully you had the chance to go through and do that particular task so that you can write down the best version of yourself. And as I mentioned a moment ago, it's a little bit like laying out on the table all your aspects of your life and then deciding, is this something that I want to keep? And is this something that I want to foster? Or is this something that doesn't serve me anymore and I need to change? So if you were able to go through and do that task, hopefully you've got a description of what it is that you're wanting to achieve, what it is that you want to get. So today's webinar is all about how do we move you towards there. And one way to do this, and one very important way, is all about goals. So why then are goals important? The most important thing about goals is that they give you a target. They give you something to aim at. You see, if you haven't got anything to aim at, you'll hit it every time. And I do this little activity sometimes with my students when I'm teaching them in a classroom, where I'll get a piece of paper and I'll just throw it randomly out into the room. And the students will say, "All right, what are you doing?" And I'll say, "Well, I'm throwing a piece of paper out." And they say, "Well, how come you just threw it in the middle?" And I said, "Well, because I'm not aiming at anything. I'm just randomly throwing it." And so then what I do is I say, okay, let's get the rubbish bin, and I put the rubbish bin in the middle of the room, and I throw the rubbish at the bin. And typically what happens is I'll either get it in straight away, or after a couple of attempts, I can get it in, or even if it's from a far distance, I move closer and closer towards the bin, and eventually it's a fairly easy task to get the rubbish into the bin. And what I do is give them the analogy that if you haven't got anything to aim at, then it's really difficult to know whether you've achieved what it is that you want to achieve. So setting goals put you or force you in a position where you've got something to aim at. And goals force you to focus your attention. We learnt last week that focusing is really important, and we'll talk about that in a few moments more. But there's an aspect of us as humans that love challenges, and this is where goals come in as well. You see, we enjoy being challenged by things. It's something about our nature that we like to grow, and we like to become the best version of ourselves. And if we're presented with an opportunity for a challenge, most people are sort of going to want to lean towards, hey, I like this because it's going to be something that's going to help me grow. And if you think of like movies and shows and so on, we love seeing a hero that gets challenged by something and overcomes adversity. There's an aspect of us that likes to see people succeed. And goals for humans are a way of organizing your life so that you've got something that you can succeed towards, so that you can be challenged, so that you can move forward. And no doubt that for you to become the best version of yourself, at some point there are going to be some challenges that you will need to overcome to be able to do that. So let's have a look at some other aspects of our life that have goals. Sport is a really good analogy because all sports have a goal. And they don't just have a goal, they've got a very clearly defined and easy to understand goal. It's something that generally people can understand fairly quickly. And if ever you've sat down to watch a sport that you've never understood before, and someone can very quickly explain it to you, it kind of gives you a different enjoyment or a different understanding of what that's happening. So if you think of a sport like basketball, well, with basketball, you've got a hoop and you've got a ball, and the goal is to get the ball into the hoop. So with limited understanding, you can appreciate a game of basketball. If you think of something like boxing, in boxing, you've got two opponents and they're basically punching each other, and they're either trying to score more points by punching the other person more, or they're trying to knock them unconscious and flat so they can win the match that way. But either way, the goal of that particular sport is to be able to put more strikes on the opponent. And if you think of a game like soccer, well, in soccer, you have a ball, you've got people kicking the ball, and you have what's called a set of goals. So in soccer, the actual aim that you're trying to do is called a goal. So all sports have a goal, and as such, it means that they are easy to understand, they're easy to measure, they're clearly defined, and it makes it easier for us to understand. In fact, if you got, let's say, a game of soccer and you removed the goalpost and you said to people like, "Hey, just kick around," you'd find that they'd probably enjoy it. It'd still be fun to kick the ball around, but it loses something quite significant because they haven't got a goal. They haven't got something that they're trying to achieve by doing this. So sports become a really good analogy of needing to have goals. So last week we spoke a little bit about you get what you focus on, and we spoke about this idea how imagine going into a shopping mall or a center, but it's at night and all the lights are switched off, and you shine your flashlight. And the first thing that you shine your flashlight on is a whole stack of women's perfume. And so your understanding is that in this particular store, it's a women's perfume store. But then you move your light across and you see that there's also women's clothing. And you think, oh, hold on, maybe it's just a women's store because it's got some women's clothing and it's also got some perfumes and other accessories and so on. And then if you go and actually turn the lights on for the whole department, you'll see that it's a huge store. Not only are there women's perfume and clothing, you also have men's clothing and things like aftershave. You'll also have things like sporting goods and electronics. So turning the lights on in the whole department store give us a really big understanding of what's actually out there. But as long as you just keep your light shining on one thing, you'll get a different appreciation of what's actually in there. So goals give us something to focus on, to put our attention on, and it allows us to consistently have something that we're aiming towards achieving. So they effectively force us to shine our light on what we want to get more of. And in our society, in our world, in the culture that we live in, it's very, very easy to get distracted because we're constantly surrounded by other stuff that wants our attention, that grabs our attention. And if you let it, it will completely dominate every bit of energy that you have. So, for example, things like TV. Think of the current affairs and the news that you see on the television. You might, if you put all your focus and attention, let's say, on current affairs, your impression of the world may well be that it's completely falling apart, that there's battles and wars going on everywhere, that everything is going wrong with the world, especially if you listen to the talkback radios where people are calling up and complaining about things. And if you're watching TV shows that highlight that as well, you'll get one particular focus or understanding of what's happening. But then if you switch channels and you, for example, let's say you start watching documentaries about how wonderful the world is, or you start listening to radio interviews about inspirational people, you'll get a completely different look on that. But the point is that we are surrounded by things that will grab our attention, so things like TV, games, gossip, gossip from family and friends and also at work, even current affairs, Facebook. There's so many things that want to get our attention. So that if you don't make an effort to focus your attention on what you want to get more of, then the likelihood is that you're going to have a lot of things that are going to distract you. And I like to call this shiny object syndrome. So shiny object syndrome is, I guess, my funny way of laughing this particular aspect off. And the reason I say laughing it off, because I'll use my daughter as an example. So my eldest daughter, Ella, is fantastic, love it a bit, but she suffers severely from shiny object syndrome. So this is a typical thing that will happen with Ella. She'll come home from school and I'll say to her, okay, Ella, I need you to empty your lunchbox. And she'll go, yeah, sure, no worries, Dad. And so she'll start doing that. And she'll go, you know what, I'm going to go and take my uniform off first. So she'll take a bag and leave it in the bedroom. And along the way, in the process of taking a bag to empty it, to get her lunchbox out, to empty it out, she'll see a shiny object. Now, this shiny object will be basically anything. It could be a book, it could be a toy, it could be a pair of socks that she goes, oh, I better pick that up and go and put that in the washing basket. The shiny object could be a sister saying, hey, Ella, come over here and play. It could be the neighbors outside that will come and knock on the door and say, hey, can Ella come out and play on a scooter? There are so many shiny objects that will take Ella's attention away. And what typically happens is that the following morning, I wake up and start organizing a lunch. I go and get a lunchbox and I open up a rotting away tuna sandwich that's been sitting there since lunchtime the day before, overnight, and I've got to clean it up. And inside I'm going, Ella, why didn't you empty your lunchbox when I asked you to? So that's what shiny object is. It's my way of saying, when you have something that you need to do and you're on your way to doing it, and something else that's bigger, that's brighter, that's better looking, whatever it is, gets your attention and completely puts you off task. Now, if you get completely taken off task or off whatever your focus is, and you stay there and you don't come back, well, then it makes it very difficult for you to achieve whatever it is that you set out to achieve. And in Ella's case, emptying the lunchbox. So what needs to happen, and what I end up doing, is giving her a lot of reminders, a lot of constant reminders. Hey, Ella, make sure you go and empty your lunchbox. And she'll go and do something. Ella, are you emptying your lunchbox? And eventually my tone starts to get a little bit more energetic, let's say it that way, where by the end of it, I'll say, Ella, come on, get your lunchbox out. Let's empty it out. Because she needs a really consistent, regular focus to keep her on task. And this is something that people often say. They'll say, you know what, I find it really hard to stay focused. I have a lot of difficulty making sure that I'm looking at the right thing, or keeping my focus on my goals. And I can understand or appreciate where that comes from. But let me give you some scenarios. Let's pretend that you're at a carnival, something like the Royal Easter Show. So if you're in Sydney, every Easter they have the Royal Easter Show, which is a huge carnival. And they have lots of rides and activities and show bags, and there's animals and there's exhibitions and there's food stores. There's a bit of everything. I mean, if there's a place where you're going to have shiny objects staring at you, something like a carnival or the Royal Easter Show is going to be exactly that example, right? There's stuff everywhere to take your attention. Now, let's pretend that you need to go to the bathroom. You've had, quite a few drinks that day or whatever the case is. You're walking around, you think, gee, I better find the bathroom. And what happens is that at first you can kind of suppress that feeling and not really focus in too much on it. You won't put too much attention on it. But as the time goes on, your need for that will start to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And it does get to a point where if you don't get to the bathroom, your whole world starts to zero in on where is the nearest bathroom. So you could be surrounded in a carnival with tons of things to take your attention, with tons of different shiny objects, but it gets to a point where your only focus in your life at that point in time is to find a toilet, because otherwise you're going to wee your pants and you're going to make a huge mess and embarrass yourself. And so imagine then looking around everywhere and you start noticing all the toilet signs, and you're trying to find actively. You might even start asking people, hey, I need to find a bathroom. Where is the nearest bathroom? So let's pretend that you go to the nearest bathroom and they've got that wonderful yellow sign sticking up that says, sorry, it's closed for cleaning. And you've just been thinking all that time, right, I found it, good, I can relieve myself, it's all good. My bet is that your focus is going to become very sharp and very in tune, because you've just found a bathroom that's closed. You still need to go to the bathroom. You're really highly motivated to find a bathroom now. And I can guarantee you that you'll find one very quickly, because you'll have so much focused energy on there that you'll get there. So it's not necessarily a case that you find it hard to focus. What ends up happening is that it's almost like we're focusing machines. We're very good at putting our focus on things, but what happens is that we continually change what our focus is. And that's the difficulty that people have with working out how to get to their goals. They'll set a goal, right? And they're focused on a little bit, and then something distracts them or something else gets their attention, some shiny object, and then that goal shifts to something else. Now, if they don't bring themselves back to what their original goal is, in Ella's case, for example, make sure you empty your lunchbox so that you don't get a mess to have to clean up the next morning. If you don't have something that's going to continually remind you, what will happen is that you completely go off focus, and that's why people find it difficult to focus. So, let's have a look at an example of someone or some animal, let's say in this example, that is very focused. This is my focused duck, right? And my focused duck is very good. This duck has got like an awesome mindset. It knows what it wants in life. It knows the best duck version of itself that it wants to be. And in this example, this duck wants to run the City to Surf. Now, the City to Surf, for those of you that aren't familiar, is a 14-kilometer fun run that happens every August, I think it is, each year. And it starts in the city of Sydney, and the contestants or the participants run through the city, and they end up making their way to Bondi Beach. So it's a fantastic run. You go through some, wonderful Sydney spots, Sydney landmarks. But if you're not a runner, if you're not someone that has consistently done a bit of training for this, it is a big chunk of a run. And for you to run it consistently, that 14 kilometers, you need to have some, fitness under your legs to be able to handle this. It's one of these things that if you have no training whatsoever and you just rock up and do it, you'll make it to the end, but you'll have to do a fair bit of walking, and it'll take you quite some time to get there. But in this case, we have the focus duck, and its focus in its life, or its biggest focus at this point in time, is to make this City to Surf fun run in August of 2015. So the likelihood of this duck succeeding at this point without any distractions is pretty high. It's got one thing that's trying to do. Let's compare the focused duck with the unfocused rabbit. Now, the unfocused rabbit also has a focus, and it's also focused on running the 14-kilometer City to Surf fun run in August of 2015. But it's also got a whole heap of other things that are taking this rabbit's attention. So the rabbit's looking at it going, okay, I'm going to start training for the City to Surf. That's my goal. Oh, I've got to work on my comedy routine. I've got a stand-up gig at the local rabbits club, and I'll have to go and do my rabbit jokes. Unfortunately, I haven't got a rabbit joke to share with you. I should have prepared a rabbit joke. But it's thinking, okay, I've got to work on my rabbit jokes. So, okay, should I start training today? No, I'll do my rabbit jokes first. That's more important. I've got to get my comedy routine. And all the while it goes, oh, you know what? I better check my Facebook page. I haven't checked Facebook in a couple of hours. So let me get online and check my rabbit feed of my rabbit friends and see what else they're all up to. And as it's checking Facebook, it remembers that the block is on, and it's loving this new series of The Block and how they're doing all the renovations. And it goes, right, I better start looking at that. I better go and check that. And at the same time, it's going, what's that shiny object over there? Now, this unfocused rabbit has got a lot of things that are taking its attention. And if we compare this to the very focused duck, who has one target or one significant target, and it's very focused, this rabbit is going to be somewhat unlikely to achieve the same things, right? Because it's got so many demands. Now, it's not to say that you can't have multiple goals. In fact, it's very good to have multiple goals. But what has to happen is that you need to make sure that you bring your focus back onto what it is that you're out there trying to achieve, or that you want to achieve. So, are goals easy to reach? Well, this really depends. It depends on the type of goal that you're setting yourself. There are some goals that are very easy to achieve. So, for example, I might set myself the goal of, okay, tonight I'm going to put all the clothes away. And I might have one basket of clothes to put away, and I might knock it over in 10 or 15 minutes. That might be a very achievable goal in a very short amount of time, in which case, yes, it's very achievable. But there are goals that are bigger and more encompassing, and no doubt that if you're looking at building the best version of yourself, you're going to have to go through a process of looking at what major things in your life you need to make some changes to, and these might take a little bit of time. So it's not so much that goals are hard or easy to achieve. It's more that if you can organize them in a particular way, they become more achievable. Okay, so let's have a look at this idea. If you take your goals and you break them up into smaller chunks, into smaller steps, they inevitably become easier to achieve. So sometimes you may have heard this question about how do you eat an elephant? And not that I envisage ever needing to eat a whole elephant, but let's imagine that one day you get locked up in a room, they put an elephant there, it's being cooked, slow cooked over hours and hours on some sort of elephant barbecue, and they say, right, you're not allowed to leave this room until you finish eating it. So it would be almost impossible to sit there and eat the whole thing in one go. But what you could do is eat a little bit and then wait, and then eat a little bit more and then wait. And at some point, sure, it's going to take some time, but at some point, one bite at a time, you're probably going to finish off eating this elephant. It's like if you've sat down to eat a really big meal and it's huge and it's fantastic and you go, yeah, I really want to eat all of this. It looks great. And it's big. And you sort of, instead of scoffing it all down in one go, you sort of do it a little bit by a little bit by a little bit. It might take you a couple of hours, but you finish it off and you go, wow, that was fantastic. All right. So if you think of your goal as trying to eat an elephant, a big thing that it's almost like a seemingly impossible task, well, the way to make it possible is that you need to start breaking it down into little segments, into little bites. So let's have a look at our focus duck again. And let's pretend that this duck has a goal of reaching the mountain, or if it's going, you know what, I'm going to run the city to surf, and for me, that's like reaching the top of a mountain. Now, climbing a mountain would be a very challenging task. And if you've listened to stories of people that are mountain climbers, and I'm not talking like a little hill at the end of the street, I'm talking like a big mountain, you know, it takes them days to do it sometimes, and they've got a camp and they kind of climb a part of the way up, and then they have to set up camp for the night and rest and then keep on going, and they've got to ration out food. But basically what they're always doing is trying to move forward towards achieving that goal, which is to get to the top of the mountain. So in order to help them, they divide the mountain up into little steps. So if we get this duck and we say, okay, your goal, as you said, is to reach the top of a mountain. But what we're going to do is build a staircase along this mountain. And it's a huge mountain. It's going to take like 3 or 4 days to climb this thing. But we're going to put steps all the way up. And all we want you to do every day is just take a couple of steps up there. So what happens is that in this duck's case, this focus duck, every time it takes a step, it's moving a little bit closer towards its goal. Now, at first, it might not, make that much of it. It might not look or appear like it's making that much of a difference. But in this case, the focus duck is going, I'm going to get to the top. And even if it takes me longer than I anticipated, it doesn't matter. What I'm going to do is take one little step at a time. So with your goals, breaking them down into achievable steps, especially if it's a big goal, right? You'll probably need to look at dividing that bigger goal into smaller chunks and smaller steps and go, okay, I understand that this is my big goal, but my focus for the moment is going to achieve the following things. So the duck might say, every day I'm going to climb 4 or 5 steps. And if I feel good that day, I'm going to climb another 3 or 4 steps. But if I feel really tired, you know what? I'm just going to stop there and rest. And every step gets me closer to the top. So let's have a look at how this duck, who has never run in its life, it's only kind of waddled with its duck feet, but it really wants to get to this goal of running the city to surf next year. So the duck might set a combination of short, medium, and long-term goals. What it's going to do is grab this big goal or this big mountain of running the city surf and break it down into little segments. Excuse me. So the duck might start by going, I'm going to aim, or I'm going to put my focus on walking for 10 minutes 3 times a week. And what it might find is that the first time it goes out for a walk, it might not even make the 10 minutes. It might only be able to walk for 5 minutes, and it just gets really tired. It goes for, it walks a little bit, walks for 5 minutes, and it's a challenge. And it might take the duck a couple of weeks of consistent walking to get to a point where it can do 10 minutes of walking 3 times a week. And so then it might go, okay, so I can do the walking now. I'm starting to get a bit of resistance and a bit of strength in my legs. So I'm going to aim to jog for 6 kilometers. But instead of just running out and jogging the 6 kilometers, he might break that down into going, okay, I'm going to jog. Instead of walking for 10 minutes a day, I'm going to jog for 10 minutes a day. And then it might go, I might jog for 20 minutes 3 times a day. And then it might go, okay, I'm going to jog for 3 kilometers. And then it might go to 4, 5, and eventually it gets to 6 kilometers. And that would be a medium-term goal. But then the bigger carrot or the bigger mountain climb here is to get to this 14-kilometer run. And so it would then start to adjust its medium-term goal to its longer-term goal, and again, building up this resistance or resilience and building up the strength and the perseverance to get to that point. Now, if this duck from day one goes, right, I'm just going to go out and run 14 kilometers. Now, it's really interesting because I went through this process quite some years ago where I was wanting to get my fitness up, and I would struggle to jog for 10 minutes without huffing and puffing like there was no tomorrow. And it took me months of being able to build up this ability to run consistently. And now, because I'm relatively fit, I can run for 30 or 40 or 50 minutes without too many issues, and I can sort of keep a nice, steady, consistent pace. So to answer the question of are goals easy to reach, it's a case of, can you break it down enough to make it reachable for you, to make it easier for you? And if you look at a goal and you go, wow, this is just way too difficult, the likelihood is that you probably need to chunk it down and break it down more into smaller steps to allow you to achieve certain parts of this. So there are two things that are really important. Or actually one thing that's really critical with all of this. And that is, you need to understand why it is that you're setting a goal. You see, if you don't understand why it is that you want to try and achieve something, the likelihood is that it's not important to you, so you're more unlikely to actually want to achieve it. Now, for me, for example, I had, being a male, I guess, and seeing these athletes, and they look fit and strong and muscular and all that kind of stuff. And all these guys have got a 6-pack for their abs. They look fantastic, and I think I really want to be able to impress my wife and take my shirt off and just go ugh and flex. And she looks at me and goes, "My God, my husband's so sexy because he's got a 6-pack." So for me, I set myself the goal of, right, I'm going to build a 6-pack. And I remember having a book and it said, right, you've got to do this many sit-ups and crunches and all sorts of stuff. And I did it for like a couple of weeks, and then I lost interest in it. And when I was reflecting back on it, I was going, why was it that I lost interest in it? And the reason was that it wasn't the 6-pack that I really wanted. What I really wanted was to be able to run around, and I think I mentioned this in the first webinar. I wanted to run around and play with my girls outside without getting tired. I wanted to be in a position where I could do hobbies and activities and feel like my body could actually do it. For example, if I went cable water skiing a few months ago, and it was great to be able to go and do that and not feel like my body had, been through a train wreck because I was so sore. Or a year or two ago, I played a season of soccer, and it was really good fun just to be able to go out and run around and know that my body was strong enough to do it. So for me, my why wasn't about getting an actual 6-pack. What it really is about improving my general fitness to allow me to do things that I enjoy. So the reason why I maintain myself fit today is because it allows me to do things that I enjoy, right? And it's different for everybody. Your why is going to be different to the person next to you. But what is important is that you have an understanding. Now, where people get caught up, and I've experienced this a lot myself, is that we set ourselves a goal and immediately we put all of our attention on, how am I going to do this? What are the steps? What is it that I need to do? And what happens is that when you embark on a goal, on trying to achieve something, quite often you don't know all of the things that you're going to need to know because you haven't actually started it yet. And it's only when you get going that you work out that, oh, I actually need to learn about this, or I need to adjust and make this decision differently. But until you get moving, until you have some sort of momentum, sometimes you don't know that. And what people sometimes get caught up in is writing out step by step every single little detail about how they're going to do this, how they're going to do their goal. And often they feel that until they've got every single step and every scenario thought out and accounted for, that they're not going to start that goal. And what can happen is that you get caught up in all of the little processes and all of the details, but you haven't actually moved towards your goal just yet. And this is where understanding why a goal is important to you supersedes the importance of understanding how you're going to achieve it. You need to trust that how you achieve it is going to appear once you've got a strong enough reason to do it. So to do this, let me give you a quick story from one of a colleague that I worked with some years ago. Now, this lady was moderately overweight. I wouldn't say that she's very overweight, but she was moderately overweight. And her family, her whole family, like I'm talking about her brothers, sisters, parents, cousins, there was a huge history of heart failure. And I think it was one of her uncles who died because of heart failure. And what they linked it to was that in this case, the weight for them was part of the issue. And for this particular colleague, she wanted to be around for her kids when they grew up, and she wanted to be around for their kids' children when they got married and had children and so on. And for her, she made a really big change in her life and said, you know what, the reason I have to do this is because I need to make sure that I look after my health to a point that I can be around for my family. She looked into the future and thought, if I keep my current eating habits and I don't do something about it, and I look at the history of my family, the likelihood is that I'm probably going to have heart failure. And that means that I'm not going to be around to enjoy the things that I envisage myself enjoying later on in life. So for this particular colleague, at this stage, she hadn't even thought about how she was going to change her eating habits and lose the weight and, all of those little things. They're all the little details. But for her, the why it was important was absolutely huge. There was a lot of emotion attached to it. And so she put herself in a position where this was an absolute no-brainer. This is something that she had to do. And it was great to see that over a period of about a year and a half or so, she looked extremely fit and healthy. She changed the eating habits of her family, and they went on to eating all sorts of different healthy foods. As a result, the family members all lost weight, and in terms of their heart and health and fitness, they're going great. So she learned along the way about better eating and about preparing food and about, all the things that you'd need to know if that was what your goal was. So, and please don't misunderstand me here. I'm not saying that, yes, you should lose weight. All I'm saying, this is an example of understanding why it is that you want to achieve something. All right. So the why, first of all, work out the why. And when you've understood why something is important, and this ties into last week's webinar, which was all about building the best version of yourself. These goals that you're going to set, the reason you're doing them is to make yourself to live to the best, to your fullest potential. So to do this, it really helps to have some tools to write down your goals, right? So that you can go through this process. And I like to use this system, the SMART goal system. Now, SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, as if, and I'll explain that one in a moment, realistic, and time-bound. So each letter in the word SMART stands for one aspect, and we're going to go through each one of these step by step. Now, importantly, there are lots of variations on the SMART goal system, and sometimes people substitute the meaning of one letter to another. So if you've come across this before, you may have come across it in different flavors. But for me, this is the version that I find tends to work well with me and also with my clients. But you can modify it however you want. Ultimately, what I want for you is for you to achieve whatever goals it is that you set yourself. So do whatever you need to do to be able to achieve that. And this is simply one suggestion or my suggestion for it. So let's start with the letter S. S stands for specific. See, when when you write down a goal, it has to be somewhat specific. If it isn't, it makes it somewhat vague, and it makes it difficult to see exactly what it is that you want to do. So an example to keep with our health and fitness theme at the moment, one example of writing a goal would be to say, or to write down, that I want to exercise more, which is great. You want to exercise more, and let's come from an understanding that you've looked at why it's important for you and that it fits in with building the best version of yourself, and you say, yeah, look, I want to exercise more. It's something that's important to me. Well, saying that you want to exercise more is great, but you're basically not really committing to anything, and you're not really specifying what it is exactly that you're going to do. So the example at the bottom here that says, I exercise for 30 minutes every Tuesday and Friday afternoons is much more specific. So what's going to happen when you tell yourself that you exercise for 30 minutes every Tuesday and Friday afternoon is that you're going to get to Tuesday afternoon, and your mindset is going to be saying to you, okay, it's Tuesday afternoon, time to exercise for 30 minutes. All right. And what will happen is that you'll go off and exercise, and you might start to feel a bit tired at the 15-minute mark or the 20-minute mark. But if you've taught yourself that your goal is that you exercise for 30 minutes, then you're going to push past that and make those 30 minutes. And you'll get to Friday afternoon and do the same thing. And a couple of weeks later, it becomes what it is that you do. You exercise for 30 minutes every Tuesday and Friday. Now, if you exercise more, great. If you exercise if you exercise less, and it's a one-off, or you got too tied up at work, or whatever the case was, that's okay. But if you keep not doing what you're specifying, it makes it very easy for you to see whether you're on track with your goal. So this is again looking at this shiny object thing. If you're shiny object syndrome, if you're getting distracted by not achieving your goals, it may well be that you haven't specified exactly what it is that you want to do. But the S for in the SMART goal system is all about being specific. So the next letter is for M, and M is measurable. Your goals need to be measurable. There needs to be something that tells you whether you're moving towards your goal or whether you've indeed achieved your goal. If it's not measurable, if there's nothing in there that can tell you whether you have or haven't achieved it, well, how do you know that you have achieved it? It's a little bit like my example at the start where I said, okay, so I put a bin in the middle of the classroom and I say, my goal is to get this piece of rubbish into the bin by throwing it across the room. My measurement for that is when the rubbish is in the bin, then I know that I have achieved my goal. So when you write your goals, there has to be something in there that tells you when you have achieved it. Okay. And you can have ongoing goals that keep going, but there needs to be something that allows you to see that, yes, I'm making progress on this. So as an example, I want to lose some weight is fine, and it's an admirable goal if that's what you want to achieve. But saying I want to lose 2 kilograms is different because you're specifying how much it is that you want to lose, right? It has a different energy about it. It certainly has a different focus on it, because you're not just focusing on losing weight, you're focusing on losing the 2 kilograms. And this is like getting your flashlight that we spoke about last week and really shining your torch and shining all the energy and light that you've got on losing the 2 kilograms. Further to that, to make it even more measurable, I've added, I want to lose these 2 kilograms by February of 2015. And we're currently in September, so that gives me October, November, December, January, February, 5 months to lose 2 kilograms. You could even break the 5 months and divide the 2 kilograms into 5 and go, right, I've got to lose this amount every month to achieve my goal, which is a little bit like looking at our focus duck breaking up their city to surf training regime to get this duck to run to 14 kilometers. Okay, so we've got specific and we've got measurable. So the A has quite a few variations. Sometimes people say that the A stands for attainable. Sometimes they say for attractive. But I like to think about it as if. I want you to think about writing your goals as if the goal has already happened. The reason it really helps to write your goal as if it has already happened is because in this step of your goal writing, you're talking and communicating directly to your subconscious mind. Last week, I gave you a little task where I said, okay, I want you to make sure that whatever you do, you don't think about an elephant playing the banjo with its trunk wearing a Christmas hat. And if you tuned into last week's webinar, you've probably got that image in your mind. And if you're listening now and I'm saying to you, make sure that you don't focus on an elephant playing the banjo with a Christmas hat on, and it's an old elephant that's playing the banjo with its trunk, playing a song and it's looking a bit grumpy. The likelihood is that even though I'm saying to you, don't pay attention to that, it's probably flashing in your mind, and all you can see is an elephant with a banjo, strumming it with its trunk wearing a Christmas hat. And the reason is that our subconscious picks up on certain types of information. And when you tell your subconscious, this is my goal and I'm actually doing it now, your subconscious goes, great, fantastic, that's what I'm doing. So if we look at the example before, where it said, I want to lose some weight, what you're effectively telling your subconscious mind is that, yes, you want to lose some weight. And your subconscious mind goes, that's great. You can want to do whatever you want. You haven't told me that I'm going to do anything just yet. So I'm just going to give you that feeling of wanting to lose the weight for as long as you keep telling me that you want to lose weight. Telling yourself that you are losing or that you have lost 2 kilos, like in that example, speaks directly to the subconscious, and it doesn't leave much room for error here. It picks up on, okay, I've lost 2 kilos. That means that's what I've got to do. So in the example that we've got here for A, as if it has already happened, one day I hope to learn to speak Italian. So what really your subconscious is picking up on here is that it's going to fill you with hope of one day speaking Italian. It's not really moving you towards speaking Italian. It's just saying, I'm going to hope for it. But if you say it as if it has already happened, for example, it is January 2015 and I can speak Italian, that sends a very different message to your subconscious mind. It's basically tapping into it and saying, you speak Italian. And so your subconscious mind goes, okay, I speak Italian. And what will start to happen is that your subconscious mind will start to focus on developing your skill of, in this case, speaking Italian. So using the A part of SMART goals, or the letter A, as if it has already happened, is really powerful. And it's important that you appreciate that it's what you're really doing is talking directly to your subconscious mind. So when you read your goals back to yourself, and we'll talk about that shortly, your subconscious mind is getting an understanding of this is the way it is. Not the way that I hope for it to be, not the way that I want it to be, the way it actually is. So let's move on to the R. The R is for realistic. Now, excuse me while I have a quick drink. Now, when I say realistic, I don't want reality, so to speak, to get in the way of you making goals for yourself that are really big and aspirational and inspirational and things that you really want to achieve. Just because you can't do it now doesn't mean that it's not a goal that you should set yourself. But what I want you to do is to look at your current situation and see how achievable that goal is in whatever time frame you're setting for yourself. So let's say, for example, that right now in September of 2014, I'm saying to myself, I want to represent Australia in downhill skiing at the Olympic Games, at the next Winter Olympic Games, right? And that might be a fantastic goal, and I might go out and tell all my friends, guess what? I'm going to represent Australia in downhill skiing. They go, good on you, Marcel, fantastic, and I'll give me a pat on the back and really encourage me. Now, there's a few pieces of information that I've left out. First of all, I don't ski. Second of all, I've never skied in my life. Third, I've never even been to the snow. So I don't even know what snow feels like, apart from putting my hand in the freezer and pulling out some ice. I've got no idea what snow is actually like. I don't know what the texture is of it. I don't know what it's like when you put skis on. I've got no idea how to strap skis on, let alone actually ski downhill. So if if representing Australia in downhill skiing at the next Winter Olympics is something that I really, really want to achieve, well, that might be a long-term goal, might be a really long-term goal in my case, because it's not something that I think I'll be able to achieve in the near future. But what is something that is achievable for me might be that I want to learn to ski. And even just reading that, instead of wanting to learn to ski, what I should really say is I have learned to ski. I might look ahead and go, right, I'm going to make sure that I get myself to the snows in the next winter. And I might write my goal to say something like, it is July of 2015, and I am at the snow skiing, which sends a signal to my subconscious mind, okay, yep, skiing is what you do. So for me, at this stage in my life, without any experience skiing whatsoever, representing Australia in the Olympic Games is probably a bit of a stretch for me. But learning to ski is something that is much more achievable for me, and in this case, more realistic. You see, if you fill yourself up with goals that are completely unrealistic and just in your world are something so stretched out that it's not going to happen anytime soon, what ends up happening is that you get quite disheartened because it feels like you're not moving forward. And this comes back to having the mountain with the duck at the bottom of the mountain, and you kind of divided the steps. You need to divide the steps up so that they're achievable, so that they're realistically achievable by you. So that moves us on to the last letter of our SMART goal system, which is T, the letter T. And the letter T is for time bound. You see, if you don't give yourself some sort of time limit, it's almost like an open goal that can last forever. So I might say, yes, I'm going to lose 2 kilos. Fantastic. When am I going to lose 2 kilos? Well, maybe by the time I turn 70 or 80. Okay, so if I don't give myself some sort of time limit, then the goal becomes a little bit wishy-washy. It's got nothing to keep it accountable. And what needs to happen with your goals is that you need to be accountable at least, and probably more importantly, to yourself. But it does also help to share your goals with other people that are willing to champion you and willing to support you, because they will be able to help you say, hey, what's going to help. In fact, when I talk to very successful people and very successful business owners, they deliberately get people that help them be accountable. It might be their co-business owners. They often have coaches or mentors that they spend time with, and they basically say, here are my goals, and this is the time limit that I'm setting for myself. And they use these people to keep them accountable. So when that time limit comes and expires, they kind of have to reflect back and report to themselves and report to other people to say, did you achieve what you set out to achieve? And if you did, fantastic. And if you didn't, what got in the way of you not achieving that? And further to that, is it still important? Is it something that you still want to achieve? Right? So to help that process, we need to make our goals time bound. So again, I'm going to use this example of one day I hope to learn to speak Italian, as opposed to it is January 2015 and I can speak Italian. What will happen is that I'll get to January in 2015 and be able to see for myself very clearly, can I speak Italian, or have I progressed towards speaking Italian, or have I not done anything? And this is where our goals and our focus really tie in, because then I can say, no, I wasn't able to achieve learning to speak Italian fluently, but I'm much closer. And you know what? In the next couple of months, I'm going to reset this goal because I want to talk fluently by March of this year, or next year, I should say. So that's where your goals can kind of spread out a little bit, and you can keep reevaluating your goal. Bear in mind, there's nothing wrong with reevaluating your goals. And setting a time limit, whether you stick to that time limit or not, is somewhat secondary. What's more important is that you have a time limit, that you've got somewhere, or it's time bound to some capacity, because then it gives you a target. And as we said right at the beginning, you need to have something to aim at. You might find that you achieve your goal in a quicker amount of time. You might set off and find that it's actually going to take you longer. Either way, you're achieving your goal, and that's why making a time bound is really important. So in summary, our SMART goal system is all about making it specific, measurable, and then I like to use as if it has already happened, because that talks directly to our subconscious mind. We make it realistic because that means that we can look at it and go, yeah, this is something that I can do. And very often when I'm coaching clients, we'll set them goals and we'll say, okay, is this actually achievable? Are you going to be able to achieve this in the next week or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever our time-bound limit is? And if it's not realistic, then we need to reassess whether we've done the goal correctly or not, right? So realistic and time-bound, specific, measurable, as if, realistic and time-bound. And one of the things that I'm going to challenge you to do during this week is to look at the best version of yourself and write some goals that use this system to help you achieve that, to help you move you towards becoming the best version of yourself. So let me give you an example, and I'm probably thinking of our focus duck still, right? But here's an example of a goal that tries to capture all of the things in our SMART system here. So the goal reads, it is August 2015 and I have just finished running the 14-kilometer City to Surf fun run. I've completed the run in under 90 minutes. I've been training twice a week and my improved fitness allows me to play with my children. I feel stronger and fitter than ever before. So if you think of that as being an example of a goal, the way it's been written extends far beyond saying I want to run the City to Surf, in the case of the duck. It's actually got a whole stack of embedded commands in there, and it's got a whole stack of information that our subconscious mind picks up on, and because we're putting focus on it, it's going to find ways to make that real in our world. So for example, let's go through specific. Is it specific? Yes. We know that it's a fun run. We know that it's going to be 14 kilometers. We know the date, and we know how long it's going to take us to run it, 90 minutes or less, right? Is it measurable? Yeah, it's measurable because we know the distance, we know the exact distance, and we know the time limit that we're also going for. Is it written as if it has already happened? And considering we're in September 2015, it's almost like you're looking ahead into the future and you're sending a big signal to your mind that this is something that is going to happen. Regardless of what you think, right, this is something that I'm actually going to make sure that I do. So reading it in that way, making it as if it's going to happen, is purely talking to our subconscious mind and saying, yes, this is going to happen. And as a result, it makes it achievable for us because the subconscious mind goes, okay, that's the way it is. In the same way that if I say to you, all right, don't focus on the elephant playing the banjo with a Christmas hat, and you've probably got an image of that in your mind right now, telling your mind, I'm going to run the City Surf next year, gives that really strong signal as well. Is it realistic for the duck? Right? Is it realistic for the duck? Well, considering that the duck broke this down into, okay, I'm going to do walking twice or 3 times a week, and then I'm going to run up to 6 kilometers, and then by the time we get to August next year, I'll be running the 14 kilometers. Yeah, it's realistic. Even if you've never jogged before, if you plan to do this next year, the likelihood is that you can do steps and break this down to get to that point. And is it time bound? Absolutely, because in August 2015, we're going to have tens of thousands of people that are running the City to Surf. The date is set, it's in the calendar, so it's absolutely time bound. You have from now until August of next year, 11 months to make this a reality. So that's an example of writing a SMART goal. Now, I'm really conscious of the time, so I want to make sure that I cover a couple of things here. First of all, goals, and I think I spoke about this in the first week of our 4-week mindset, that your mind is a bit like a garden, and you need to remember that if you let your garden be and you don't do anything proactively about looking after it, what's going to happen is that it'll start to fill up with weeds, and you won't get what you want in there. So think of your goals like being a seed that you're planting. You'll need to water a seed, you need to make sure it gets enough sunlight. If you're really keen, you need to make sure that it's got the right soil nutrition and that's getting all the right stuff. And after, at first, you're probably going to look at this and not even see anything. But what's happening is that the seed is starting to form underneath the soil, the roots are starting to grow out, and eventually it starts to poke out. And then, given more time, it starts to grow and grow and grow. And after some time, you have this beautiful flower that's coming out of the flower pot, as we can see in the image here. So you need to understand that your goals need a bit of nurturing, especially if it's something that's stretching you, and a lot of goals will. And if it's something that's outside your comfort zone, it's okay for your goal not to happen immediately and straight away. Be prepared to do a bit of nurturing. So, how do you nurture your goals? Well, you've got to stay focused, right? You've got to keep reminding yourself of what it is that you actually want. And this is why writing your goals is really important. And what I highly recommend is write out, as many goals as you want to achieve in whatever time frame you want. Make sure that you understand why it's important to you, right? And write them out and maybe put them. Well, let me tell you what I do. I've got a A4 page that has a series of goals that cover every aspect of my life in terms of my relationship with my wife, my family, my work, my businesses, my health and fitness. It looks at every aspect of it, my recreation, and I've written it using all the information that I've done, and I've got it on one A4 sheet that is taped to my bedside table. And I've put it there very deliberately because I go to sleep in that bed every night and I wake up there every morning. And at the very least, I'm looking at my goals twice a day, at morning, at night. But what I've also done is I had it recorded on my phone for a while. So when I was driving to work, every now and then, I'd play the recording of myself talking my goals. I'd read them out to myself and listen back. And what I used to find is that, especially if I hadn't read them for whatever reason that day or a couple of days, having it there on the spot reminds me of what I'm trying to do. So make sure that you put your goals in prominent places that are important to you. And to help illustrate this, I want to I've got a picture of a plane on there. My wife's cousin is a pilot with the Air Force. And one lunchtime, I think it was, we were having a chat, and he was telling me about the autopilot system that they use in the Hercules planes that he flies with the Royal Australian Air Force. And it was really interesting because let's say they're flying from Sydney to Brisbane. What they do is that they take off in the plane and they program the plane to have a flight mapper or an autopilot that tells it your destination is Brisbane, you need to fly north in that direction. And I was saying to him, so what happens? Does the plane just kind of point itself in the right direction and just keep going and then it lands? And he said, absolutely not. What happens is that the plane is constantly being shifted around because when you're up in the sky, there are winds, there's turbulence, there's all sorts of stuff. And what happens is that let's say a huge gust of wind comes and instead of flying straight, it's tilted the plane to the left and it starts flying left. Well, what happens is that the autopilot checks what the goal is, which was to get to Brisbane, and it checks its current destinations and it makes adjustments along the way. So it's not like the plane takes off and goes in one direct straight line and then lands at the airport. What actually happens is that it takes off, it gets up in the air, and then it's almost like it starts zigzagging its way through. It goes a little bit to the left, it makes a correction. Well, it overcorrected, it went too much to the right, let's make another correction. It's going too high, let's make another correction. So the autopilot in these planes has been programmed to know its destination and then to continually check what it's trying to do. And that's your challenge, to stay focused. So the autopilot is basically doing that by it knows very clearly what its goal is, and it's continuously checking, continuously making sure that it's on task, staying focused. And if a shiny object comes through, it kind of goes, oh, that's an interesting shiny object. Where's my focus? Bang, corrects itself and moves back into the correct direction. So your homework for this week, our third week of the 4-week Mindset Bootcamp, is to write some smart goals to help you become the best version of yourself. So pick whatever aspects of your life you're prepared to make some changes with, and write yourself some goals that are set out in that way. And then the second part of this, you've got to keep yourself focused. So regularly read your goals, pin them up somewhere, record them, put them on your phone, put them on your computer, stick them to your fridge, wherever it is that you know that you're going to be seeing them. Read them out aloud to yourself. Use them as a set of affirmations. Whatever you need to do, make sure that you continually understand what it is that you're trying to achieve, because the world around you is going to have distractions along the way, but your task is to remain focused. It's like putting yourself on autopilot. So that brings us to the end of our webinar for tonight. I certainly hope that you've enjoyed it and that you've taken a lot from it. Now it's past our time limit, so I'll hang by for a few minutes. And if you've got any questions, please type them in, and I'll do my best to answer them. But for everyone on the recording, thank you very much for tuning in. I hope that you've gotten a lot out of it, and let's get to writing some goals. Have a great night. And I'll also mention as well that I'll make sure that I'll put a recording on this and send everyone through the link so that you can revisit it if you need the information. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.